here they come.
Welcome to this week's episode of Here They Come. I'm Paul Ramlow.
And I'm Kate Lockhart.
Kate, last week, Jeff Gorell and the Standardbred Breeders and Owners Association of New Jersey shared artist renderings of what could be a new Meadowlands racetrack. The renderings showed the new grandstand, which Gorell and his group are possibly looking to build on the backstretch. And then a couple days later, they said the cost of that new grandstand could be possibly $70 million, and they were looking to try to raise $100 million total for the entire operation of taking over the Meadowlands.
It's amazing to me, Paul. First of all, $100 million, I'm not sure that's what I would have guessed, but I have no context for this. It seems as if they're really walking us through this process step by step as they're considering what it's going to take over operations of the Meadowlands. We're continuing to get updates about where they are. Jeff Gorell said this was phase one. It's come to a close. They're now moving on to phase two. Tom Lucento of the SBOA NJ said he felt like they're moving down the right path. And we'll see where the next steps lead us. The architects who designed this grandstand, who provided these artist renderings, are folks who designed Tioga Downs as well as Georgian Downs, so they do have some racetrack experience. And now we'll just see if it comes to fruition. More news from the Meadowlands, Paul. Darren Zuccali is calling for a youth movement this Friday, the 18th, at Meadowlands Racetrack. Darren is someone that they've had on their TV broadcast. I know he does some handicapping as well. And he's 27 years old, excited about the sport. And he's asked all his friends on Facebook to come to the Meadowlands Racetrack to try to introduce some new folks in the younger crowd, those under 40 specifically, to harness racing and to having a great night out at the racetrack.
Yeah, we hear a lot about we have to attract a new young audience, and here's somebody who's actually taking the first step and trying to make that happen. I'll be interested to see how that night turns out for Darren and for the folks at the Meadowlands.
Yeah, and if you're under 40 or if you have friends that are under 40, please invite them to the track, introduce them to the sport, show them how to make a couple bets. Should be a good night. Another effort that's going on at the Meadowlands sort of directed towards younger folks is Dave Brower of the Meadowlands is now much more active on Facebook. They've got him on Facebook every race night making comments as the races progress on which horses he thinks folks should look out for, bets that he would make. And as well, those posts are going to be now featured on Twitter. If you'd like to follow them, they're at the Meadowlands. That's their Twitter feed. And then the Facebook page is the Meadowlands Racetrack Facebook fan page. So be sure to look for those for your picks and tips as the races progress the rest of this meet.
Well, this past Monday was Valentine's Day, Kate, and over the entire Valentine's Day weekend, 3 racetracks took the opportunity to have some interesting off-the-cuff races, if you will. It started out last Friday at the Meadows Racetrack where they had a driving competition between 4 men and 4 women. The men actually won the 2-race competition by a score of 42-30. The 2 races had the names of the Battle of the Sexes Trot and the Guys and Dolls Pace.
Yeah, I have to point out, Paul, although the men came away the winners, Mike Wilder stepped up and said, look, we had a great crowd. And he said no one should think that the women can't drive, that they drive great and as safely as men. So I just want to make that point. Even though the women lost on that day, we represented ourselves well.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. And then on Monday, Monticello Raceway had their Lady Godiva Pace, a race for all female drivers. Kind of an interesting happening in this race. Let's let track announcer Howard Oil kind of describe the start of the race and let you know what happened.
Could somebody grab the helmet in front of the grandstand? It's near the rail if someone could get to it.
Kate track publicist John Manzi called the Say Hey Kid Willie Mays, and that's his referral to Lisa Crom, who lost her helmet there as the race started. And go figure, she actually then went on to win the race, helmetless.
Unbelievable, Paul. It was nice to see someone looking out for her, handing her helmet to her at the end of the race. I have to say, I've never seen that before. Have you seen that in all your years of harness racing?
No, never have. Quite an interesting occurrence there, and the pictures were very fascinating, seeing her coming down the stretch, just wearing her stocking cap, if you will. I don't know.
Balaclava. It must have been cold, quite cold there at Monticello.
Right. So it was kind of made for an interesting picture, in which I used on the USTA homepage. I think some people probably got a what was going on there kind of look in their outline.
Absolutely. There was another Valentine's Day event, Paul, down at Pompano Park, where there was the Sweetheart Invitational Trot and Pace, featured, again, female drivers, and it was a dead heat for first place.
Yeah, what they did is had two races, like you said, one trot and one pace, and they gave scores based on the usual purse distribution, the 50, 25, 12, 8, and 5%. And what happened is we had a lady win one race and finish sixth in the other race, and that was Jamie Rucker, our good friend and former co-worker, who was the defending champion last year of the races at Pompano, along with Grove Formia. So they finished in a dead heat for that title at Pompano, and it was quite interesting, obviously. Well, Kate, in our last episode, we talked a little bit about Big Jim topping Stan Bergstein's 2011 experimental championship ratings, as reported in Hoofbeats magazine. We're going to take a close look at one of those top 25 contenders this week.
Yeah, the filly we're going to take a look at, Paul, is See You at Peelers. She was the top-ranked filly on Stan's list. She came in at number 12 with a rating of 149 and 2 after her 2-year-old season where she took a mark of 151 and 3. It was an impressive season for her last year. I know Stan is really high on the filly coming back for her 3-year-old year, as is trainer Jimmy Takter.
Right, what was not to like about her 2-year-old season? Unbeaten, New York Sire Stake champion, Breeders' Crown champion. Now, Ken Weingartner had a chance to talk with trainer Jimmy Takter about See You at Peelers.
Cabrini, Hanover, and Meadowlands was two really great horses. I mean, they did it as 3-year-olds. I mean, Cabrini broke world record as a 2-year-old, and she was a top horse. This horse is a little better gait than Cabrini were, I mean, but you never know. I mean, she as a 2-year-old, she was definitely better than both Meadowlands and Cabrini, but you never know how they're going to go as a 3-year-olds. Peelers was like a little bit medium-sized filly, and she growed a couple inches and really filled out. That's positive. I think it's hard for a pacing filly to compete in the highest level if they're very small. I mean, and they need little size, especially when she got to go on the bigger tracks.
Thanks a lot, Jimmy. Continued success with See You at Peelers as she enters her 2011 season. Well, Kate, another trainer made the headlines last week in the February-March issue of a magazine called Working Mother magazine. Trainer Julie Miller was featured in their Why I Work section.
It was a great article, Paul. First of all, kudos to our harness racing communications. I love, they're tasked with trying to get harness racing news out in the mainstream media, which can be a daunting task at times, but they worked to get this story placed, and it turned out really well. It's a nice story where Julie talks about trying to find some balance between both her work life and her home life, and she mentions, how she can't make it to all her children's field trips for school, but she does try to make one a year, and how it is she makes a decision when there's a conflict between the two things. And I feel like it's great to see Julie Miller profiled in a magazine that you wouldn't otherwise see harness racing mentioned in, and it turned out really well.
Yeah, I think one thing we take for granted a lot is that drivers, trainers have real lives. They're not just at the track day and night taking care of horses. They do have family commitments and that, and this kind of brought it out to the forefront, I think, and it's wonderful to see those kind of comments and realize, hey, these horsemen are people too.
Well, that wraps up this week's episode of Here They Come. There's a few folks we'd like to thank this week, starting with Jimmy Takter. I'd also like to thank Ken Weingartner and our producer, Rich Johnston. I'm Kate Lockhart.
And I'm Paul Ramlow. Join us again next time for another episode of Here They Come.